Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Travel Coffee Break. I'm Alistair Mackenzie, and I have two guests with me this week talking about completely different topics. On the first hand, I've got Jonathan Fryer, who is a broadcaster, a writer, an expert guide. What else are you, Jonathan? What have I missed out?
I'm a lecturer at SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies, mainly on the Middle East, but not exclusively.
Okay, and the reason I've invited Jonathan to come along today is because he's going to be in November setting off leading a tour for Jon Baines Tours, who are specialists, cultural tour people. And actually, Jonathan, I was going to ask you, it's not just culture tours, but I noticed they do medical tours is
right.
big in their program.
Originally, when Jon Baines started it, it was almost exclusively for medics, and then one thing led to another. But it's interesting that, of course, medics are not only interested in medicine, but some of them do have specialist tours which do include visits to hospitals and others. But this tour will not be doing that. This is very much culture and history and trying to make sense of the trade routes that were ran across Arabia 2,000 years ago.
Absolutely, it is the way that that these things work out. It's in the life span, the life cycle of a small tour operator. Actually, they usually start out as travel agents, and they get an expertise by virtue of what their customers ask them for, and then they turn it into an operation, and they start actually organising it. And pretty soon, if they're any good at it, they get repeat business, and that's exactly what happens. You know, the medics suddenly say, well, actually, is there anything else we'd like to look at? Other stuff as well, and suddenly it expands. And if you're not careful, and he's okay because it's Jon Baines Tours, but if you're, for example, if you make the mistake of being Himalayan Kingdoms, fantastic company, so fantastic that all their regular clientele just kept coming back and back, and then saying, "Do you go to the Andes?" And several years later, they had to change their name to Mountain Kingdoms to as it were, cover the expanded range. Let me get straight on, though, to introducing also Theodora Sutcliffe, who is a writer, writes for The Guardian, written for the Daily Mail. I think you are
freelance hackery, and I'm also a blogger.
Freelance hackery, and at the moment you're in Bali, which is it's midnight there, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, it's slightly after midnight, but I don't know if you can hear in the background. Some of the dogs are still awake.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. You write about a whole range of subjects, food and travel and so on and so forth. But you also, I think, probably one of your claims to fame is that you have been, for the last few years, globetrotting. You've led a sort of a nomadic parent's life to your teenage son Zach. So the pair of you have actually been traveling around the world. It's about 4 or 5 years you've been doing that?
Well, it's 4 years. I mean, we did 4 years. I was hoping to stretch it to 5, but he turned 13, and there's something very specific that tends to happen with nomadic or traveling children when they hit their teens, which is that they'd like to settle down, they'd like to have fixed friendships, they'd like all the stuff that comes with a home and a base, which honestly wasn't an issue for the first 4 years, in which I'm very lucky. So we decided to settle down, and Bali was where we'd agreed that we would settle down, and so here we are. So I'm a recovering nomad.
Okay.
I've done that transition from sort of global travel to being an expat, which is quite a strange one.
And actually, that thing of being in effect a single parent, and a single parent for an active teenager who dives just as you do, is where we sort of come in with the whole business of learning or gaining qualifications in diving, which is what we're going to talk about shortly. So let me start off, though, if I can, with you, Jonathan. We've already sort of outlined what this is all about. This is a new tour for Jon Baines, and it takes place in November, and it covers both Oman and Jordan, and the real theme of it is frankincense. Let's start there with frankincense itself, because I've never been all all that sure what it is, and I had to look it up when I got the note about your tour. So what exactly is frankincense, and what's its role in today's society?
It's an aroma which is created by burning resin from a particular species of trees. There are actually several of the different types of these trees, which, if rather like tapping rubber from a rubber tree, if you bleed these trees, then out comes a sort of gooey, sticky stuff which then dries and becomes really rock hard. And thousands of years ago, people discovered that if you then burnt this, it let off what they considered to be an extremely beautiful perfume, and it acquired huge value, which is of course why the three kings allegedly brought frankincense along with gold and myrrh to the baby Jesus.
Is it a beautiful smell, perfume?
It's a very relaxing smell, and indeed many Christian churches, as well as the Jewish religion, have used frankincense in their ceremonies. At one stage, the early Christians, though, particularly the early Romans, banned frankincense because they thought it was a bit too heady and a bit too decadent, but then it was brought back into favour and is still burnt very much in the Gulf. Oman not only produces frankincense but also consumes it and sells it at still at a pretty good price, though not quite its weight in gold as used to be the case in the past.
Why was its weight in gold? I mean, was it just simply an expression of the demand for it, in that all the churches were using it and everybody wanted it at home? Is that the reason?
It was, I think also there was an element of exoticism in it, because most of it had come originally from what's now Somalia, and also parts of Yemen and Oman. And when people further north discovered this, they were absolutely thrilled with it. And there was a bit of frankincense mania, just as there was tulip mania in Europe in the 17th century, and tulip bulbs acquired the most ridiculous value on the market in Holland. Similarly, frankincense got massively overvalued, but it is still, as I say, still used, still sold, and is one of Oman's main exports.
When I was looking it up, I did actually find a photograph, which I'm now quickly trying to locate. I think I put it on the blog. I'll probably have to see if I can get it in one go here.
Have I asked Jonathan a question? Is this part of the format or not? Is it psychotropic then? You say it's got a relaxing scent. Is it actually psychotropic?
It does have an effect on people. It calms people down, and it was used, in the sort of precursors of mental hospitals and things, places where there was relaxing water and this smell. Interesting enough, while Alistair finds the picture of it, it's not very attractive, as you can see now on the screen. Looks rather strange. It's resin, and it looks like
a bowl of rocks, doesn't it?
It does, and the murkier it is, the better it smells. The rather nice, sort of pristine white one is not usually quite as valuable as the really cloudy one. That's the one that gives off the strongest aroma.
So if I was going to go to the market now, this is a photograph taken recently in a market somewhere, and buy, say, a cupful, what sort of value is that these days?
Well, in these sorts of markets, it depends how well you haggle. You're short to be able to get it for a few pounds, but they might try and get something more than that.
Okay, so it's not going to cost me 50 quid for a cup or something. No. Okay, excellent. And then when I got it home, you think I should set fire to it or just leave it?
Well, you burn. I mean, rather as one burns incense, little incense burners, and the Omanis have rather nice pottery burners with a candle, and so you would put one piece on top of the burner. You don't put the whole pile on, and so if you use it sparingly, it can last for months, if not years.
Excellent. You talk in the blurb about the tour about the Frankincense Trail. Was there a sort of definable trade route for frankincense?
Yes, there was, because certainly 2,000 years ago, most of it was coming from the Horn of Africa, and it then went across the bottom of the Red Sea and through what's now Yemen into Oman, and then up north and through the land of the Nabateans, which is the second half of the tour, hence the link. The Nabateans being a Semitic people who were particularly strong at the time of Jesus Christ, actually, by coincidence, and they really controlled the main north-south trade route through which frankincense and other goods passed, and they taxed the trade, and that is how they became so prosperous and built the wonderful city of Petra.
And that trail actually goes on, doesn't it? Because everybody sort of assumes it more or less stops at Petra, but it goes north up towards Jerash, and it also goes, the bit that people often forget, it also goes west as well into what is now Israel. In fact, I've been on the other side of the border from Petra to one of the caravanserai locations, buildings, ruins in the Negev. So that it splits off everywhere from there.
It does, and indeed there are still Nabatean settlement ruins in the Negev desert. I think we always have to be very careful about talking about trails, whether it's the frankincense trail or indeed the Silk Route, because there were never one trail or one route. The Silk Route, for example, which linked China to the Roman Empire and later to other parts of Europe, it was never just one route. There were alternative routes which went through different ways. So indeed, you can imagine the camel trains coming up, and most of them passing through Petra, that amazingly atmospheric Seek, the narrow entrance into Petra, and then splitting off and going off in different directions.
A cue here for Theodora, because I know you've lived along the Silk Route itself. I mean, through Mongolia and.
Well, yes. I mean, we spent time in Qalhat, which actually had what claims, I don't know, what is genuinely believed to be a Nabatean port, which surprises me because they're not supposed to be seafarers. But yes, we've also spent time in northern China, which is, the nature of the Silk Route. It's just both Silk routes and spice routes are so vague and so abstract and so complicated, because you've got webs of trade that go back. I mean, if you look at the Pacific Islands, for example, these were people with extremely simple civilizations and very small boats, and they were managing to trade over immense distances before the Christian era. So while there's this popular concept of Silk Road as one that you can sort of follow up and it goes through the stars, the Chinese perspective on it is slightly different. I mean, the Chinese perspective is that it's all about one road that was discovered by Zhang Qian in the 2nd century BC. But yes, we did live in Harbin, which is in. Actually,
we were talking yesterday. I remember very well you writing an absolutely fascinating piece about Harbin, particularly during the winter, because of course it's famous for its ice festival and everything. Anyway, but you had ventured up into the mountains for a ski break with your son, and the description of this kind of monolithic ski resort up in the mountains was absolutely excellent. I had a real sense of being there, and they clearly hadn't quite got the subtleties that the alpine ski market might have. But that's a different subject altogether. Let's just go back to the tour itself. Now, I'm going to do first of all, we've had a question from Ron Marder up here, which I'm going to select, and he's saying, what other goods does one buy in the Oman markets besides frankincense? In other words, I think he means today, if you're going into the market in Muscat, then what other things should you come away with? What are the local?
Well, the two things that particularly are very popular are the silver daggers in their wonderful embossed and the embroidered hats, because the Omanis, unlike the other Gulf Arabs, don't wear a cloth over their head and a cord to hold it down. They have these beautifully embroidered hats, which are much more reminiscent of what one sees in Uzbekistan, for example.
Okay.
So, two things really, so the popular things, unless you're a multimillionaire, in which case you buy that little bit of oil that's still left in the
Okay. Hope that's answered that one then, Ron. Now, I'm going to do something that we haven't done before because it's completely new to Google Hangouts, this little showcase app here, because I think I should be able to now show you I'm hoping the audience can see that. I'm hopefully showing you now the website, the link to the website to Jon Baines Tours and to that gold frankincense and trade in Oman and Jordan page. So what I can't tell, because it's on the side of my screen, is whether it's actually displaying. So I'm hoping that maybe Ron or somebody would tell me in questions and answers that it is actually being displayed. Anyway, the link to it is on the travelcoffeebreak.com blog page, so you can find it there. But while I've got it in front of me, let's talk about the actual tour itself. It's a mega tour, really. It's from the 14th to the 17th of November.
Yeah.
Sorry, the 4th to the 17th of November. And as you indicated before, it's in sort of two parts, because let me just quickly get to the screen share if I can find that quickly. There we go. Come on. Oops, get rid of that. Come on. Come on. Why won't it go? Oh, I know. I've got to toggle out of that one now. Okay. All this new stuff. Right. It should be showing me.
And Ron told you can see it as well.
Good. Good. Now, somewhere, here we are. That's the page I'm looking for. Let me go back to here. Oh, hold on. No, that's the wrong one. Forgive me for getting this so hopelessly wrong. Where has it gone? It's the one with the Jon Baines Tours. There we go. Let's try that. Okay, so you've seen the link on the new thing, but actually, I don't know if you can see this. I'm showing you from my screen now the Jon Baines Tours thing. But the reason I was going here was because I wanted to go to this to Google Maps. And my point is that for those whose geography is escaping them for the moment, that Amman is down here on the tip of the Persian Gulf here, and sorry, I'll zoom in a bit. Here, and Jordan, of course, is up the other end. Saudi Arabia is spread between the two. So this tour from the 4th to the 17th is in fact in two parts, both in Muscat, and then halfway through you get an airplane and fly up to Jordan. In fact, it's not the only airplane trip, is it? I think. Jonathan, it's not the only airplane trip, is it?
I haven't had final confirmation, but I imagine we might be flying to Salalah.
Yes, that's what I was looking at on the schedule.
Because that is rather a long way. You can do it overland, but it does take rather a long time. But the point is that in Oman, we'll not just be in Muscat and its neighbouring settlements, but also travel a bit down the coast to Sur, which is a seaport, which used to be one of the major ports for the very important trade route that ran down right the way down the Arabian Gulf and down the east coast of Africa, trade in timber and pearls and other such things. So we're not suggesting that it's all about one sort of trade and just about the frankincense and the gold, though those are obviously the eye-catching ones. The point being made is that long before we acknowledged the existence of a globalized world, there was a globalized world. Mm-hmm. And there were these incredible trade routes linking Arabia, Europe, Africa, Asia, and people, of course, spending months often traveling, the merchants actually carrying things, or else doing it in stages and selling things on from one to another.
I'm just looking at the itinerary now, and I see that yes, what's that? 3 days in, there's a drive down to Nizwa. Then on the 8th, the Sake Plateau. The 9th, you drive back to Muscat and fly to Salalah. That was the other journey in there. Now that's at the, if I remember correctly, that's up the top end of Oman, isn't it?
No, it's down the bottom end.
It's down the bottom end. Oh, it's the other way. Okay.
On the Indian Ocean, and is a completely different climate from the rest of the Arabian Gulf. It's always a bit of a shock to tourists who go there and find it's really verdant, really green, and less tropical. And it's a delightful place, and a very nice resort, and it's where a lot of Gulf Arabs, and particularly Omanis obviously, go in the summer or in the autumn, which is what this will be, to escape some of the more extreme heat of drier parts of the country and the region.
And it's also where frankincense was grown.
Well, where some of the trees were in the area around that, yes, and it would also be a port where some of the frankincense could have been brought in from the Horn of Africa.
Then the 11th of November, so yes, just after halfway through, it's back to Muscat and then flying up to Amman in Jordan, and so then that's where we get the second half of the tour, which visits first of all Jerash, which is a fantastic location.
It is. I mean, I think it's one of the best preserved of all the Roman area, the Roman era. Sites. It's wonderfully atmospheric and not that crowded, unlike some other places in the Middle East.
Have you been there, Theodora? Jerash, you must have done.
Actually, no. And I've been to some of the Roman stuff in Lebanon, which is fantastic. But we weren't, with the exception of Petra. I think Jordan can be a bit problematic because you kind of start with Petra, you sort of do Petra, and do the Wadi Rum, and then. It's also, we made the mistake of not hiring a car and trying to do it on public transport or hitching. It just becomes inconvenient. So we didn't see as much of Jordan as I'd wanted to. And I don't find it. There's a lot of hype about how it's a great value travel destination, but I actually think I would rate Lebanon better on value. Not that it's cheaper, but that you actually get, a better quality of experience.
Lebanon's certainly more nice. It's all packed together. Yes, I mean you can go off to Baalbek for an afternoon, leave the beach and go up and ski and come back down again. It's extraordinary little pocket country full of delights.
That was always its great claim to fame, wasn't it? That in Beirut you could do exactly that. You could go up the mountain and ski, and there is that ski resort. The Westin, I think, took it over. I forget what its name is now. At the top of Mount Lebanon, and then and there's a ski resort and all the ski lifts and everything else, and then you can come down the road and, as you say, go sunbathing and water skiing in the Mediterranean, from Byblos or somewhere really exotic. Which is, if I'm right, you'll probably know this, Jonathan. Byblos is the oldest known city as such, or town.
Well, it claims to be one of them.
It's splendid, Byblos, I think.
The Syrians.
Sorry.
The Syrians insist it's Damascus, but yes, the Lebanons say it's Byblos.
Anyway,
right.
We've strayed into the Lebanon. Maybe that's for a tour next year, Jonathan. You're quite right. I mean, the thing about Jordan is that it is quite kind of linear. So, and traditionally, if you fly into Amman, then what you would do is on sort of day one, you'd go north up to Jerash, do that, come back to Amman, and then start going down the road to Petra and Wadi Rum and Aqaba and all that kind of thing. But I think yes, Jerash is an extraordinary site, very well preserved. I was really lucky. A lot of people don't appreciate this, but when I went there, it was with the blessing of at that time Royal Jordanian Airways, but their UK director, man on the ground, was shortly to become the Minister of Tourism. So he kind of backed this whole trip that I did down there, and as a result, I wound up being shown around these sites by the tourist police. Now, the tourist police are largely recruited from academics, from people at university doing their PhD in Jordanian history and the like. So they are incredibly well informed, and I don't think people really appreciate that. When they see the tourist police, they sort of probably steer well clear of them. But actually, they're very engaging, and they know an awful lot. In fact, the guy who showed me around Petra had been born in one of the caves. He was the chief of police, and he knew everything there was to know about Petra. So anyway, that's my little bypass on that. But from your point of view, Jonathan, you're doing Jerash the first day, and then what are you doing after that?
And then heading down south. I mean, as you said, it's very much a linear country, at least as far as the tourist route is concerned, because the vast expanse of desert doesn't have all that much in it. But the King's Road is an interesting route down with a few castles, and anyone who is a Lawrence of Arabia freak can start immediately switching into Lawrence of Arabia mode. It becomes very atmospheric, and indeed little bits of the railway are still there. Some of it's still being used. He deliberately didn't destroy the whole thing. He just kept blowing up little bits to irritate the Turks and to keep them bogged down. And it is a very atmospheric place. And of course, Wadi Rum has an extraordinary atmosphere. I don't know if Theodora actually slept out in the open there or in a little tent in Wadi Rum, but it's a magical experience.
I think any moonrise over the desert, I mean, name your desert, pick your moon, and sleeping out in the open, doing style, whichever desert you're in, it's always magical because you've got silence and that light as the big moon rises, and the ghostly light, and it's just extraordinary.
And more stars than you're ever likely to see in Europe.
Indeed, absolutely. And we have to say, I mean, the Jordanian people are incredibly hospitable and nice. And everyone who goes there always say, oh, this is my favorite Arab country, because everyone was so nice and so welcoming, so polite, and everything worked, and etc., etc. So in a sense, it's a good place, particularly for people who never traveled in the Arab world, to dip their toe in. Not into the sea but into the sand, and to realise that there are great people there.
I think that's a very good suggestion.
One of the easier destinations in the Arab world for women travellers without a man in tow as well, I would say. One of the easier ones.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is. It's a very good introduction to the Middle East. In the same way, I would suggest that Singapore is for people who are going to the Far East for the first time, because it's not quite the culture shock that they would get perhaps in other parts of the Far East. But Theodora, you may have a view on that.
Gosh, what's my view on Singapore? I like Singapore. I don't know. I mean, there's a general absence of space in Singapore. I mean, I know Lebanon's compact, but it does have these sort of elevations that give it a lot more range. And actually, when you get out into the back, or when you get out into the back country, it does become a lot less built up. I'm actually a huge fan of Singapore, but I'm not sure. Gosh, I'm not sure that it would be the best introduction to. Sorry. I think the interesting thing about it is the sort of quadrilingual culture. Everything's done in the 4 languages, You can get a lot of food experiences. It's extremely safe. It's very well organised in terms of museums and history and culture. So yes, I mean, I think it is a good introduction. But Thailand is also, I mean, excluding the political situation at the moment, Thailand is also an easy intro as well. And you get a lot more of the sense of colour and magic there at certain times of year.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I'm pleased you said that, because it's not really it's not a fashionable view. A lot of people like to criticise Singapore because they describe it as being artificial or plastic, or and in parts of it are. You know, the last remaining bits of old Singapore, like Bugis Street, they famously actually put a plastic polymer over the cobblestones to protect it, and it has that kind of that mentality to it. But yeah, for first timers, I think it's a good way in. We've departed again from the subject at hand, though. The Jon Baines Tour goes. We wound up at Petra. There's only a couple more days after that. And Wadi Rum. Is there anything else on the program, Jonathan?
Not that I can recall straight away, no. But basically, obviously, it's going to be a mixture in the Jordanian part, a mixture of historic sites and, I say, the Lawrence of Arabia atmospheric sessions as well. And certainly I hope we will be able to see Aqaba. Aqaba is an extraordinary place. I mean, it used to be just a tiny little community. The first time I went there as a teenager, it was just a village, really. And now it's become a rather smart and rather beautiful seaside resort. But the fort is still there, the one that Lawrence of Arabia famously succeeded in sacking, and to the astonishment of the Brits back in Cairo.
As I recall, Aqaba, I remember it for being a lovely place to go at the end of a rather dusty and hot trip down through Jordan, but also for its proximity to, of course, Qalhat on the other side of the border. And I always remember there was a lot of talk about having a joint airport, and that eventually never really came to anything, which is a great shame, because that could have worked really well. But it's certainly worth going. And if you're thinking about learning to dive, which is a subject we're turning to now, Aqaba is one of the places where you could certainly do that. Let me just say of the tour, Jonathan, it's how many people are going on it, and are there many? Do you know what the booking's like at the moment? It is still available for booking.
There are still places available, so anyone who is suitably enchanted by the idea is very welcome to sign up.
It's a small group tour, so we're talking what, sort of 15, 20 people, that kind of thing?
Yes, no more than that. Yeah.
Okay, and we should say that all of these flights up and down to Salalah and between Amman and Jordan are all tot up, so it's not a cheap holiday. We're talking, if you include the flights from London, you're talking about £3,500. A lot of money. The ground arrangements, which of course include the flights between the two anyway, are just short of £3,000. So not a cheap holiday. But for you, Jonathan, at the end of it, what will be the kind of the most satisfying response to the tour? In other words, what will you think? Oh, I'm glad they enjoyed that bit, because that's what I was. I thought that was a highlight that I was really looking forward to showing them.
In a sense, there are two types of experience I'd hope people have. One is obviously the physical experience of seeing some really beautiful places, Petra, Jerash, Muscat, which I love, the little old city of Muscat, for example. And the other is that
and that amazing mosque as well.
Indeed. And the other thing is that this tour, like a lot of Jon Baines tours, has lectures on the tour. So it's not just travelling with a local guide, but they will get a series of talks about the Frankincense trade route and other aspects of the Nabatean civilization and trade between different parts of the world. So, in a sense, it's a learning experience. And so, from my point of view, obviously, the more people take in and seem to be enchanted by the stories, the history of the place, the better, and that they may then wish to go back themselves and discover more of the region.
Excellent. Okay, Jonathan, you're welcome to stay put. You may well have something to add to the conversation. But I'm going to turn now to Theodora because I want to talk about scuba diving. It's a subject we haven't really talked about on the Travel Coffee Break before. And Theodora, when did you get started in scuba diving?
Well, I was a very nervous diver, so I actually only qualified 4 years ago. Before that, I was so nervous about there's one particular thing that you have to do, which is to clear your mask of water. So you have this mask that covers you right up to your nose, and then you have to fill it up with water until it covers your eyes, and then you have to clear that while you're under the water. And I hated doing that particular skill, with the result that sorry, my son's just wandered in. With the result that I was very nervous about actually embarking on a course. So I didn't do that until in 2010 I did yet another fun dive, and I said to the guy, I'm fiddling with my jacket, why am I not going down? And he said, well, you should do your course. So I've only been diving for 4 years, really.
And did Zach start diving at the same time?
No, he didn't. He started when he was 10, and he started in Qalhat Island. And normally when we dive together, he's got a sort of threshold. He doesn't like to do more than one dive in a day, whereas I'll often quite happily, particularly if I'm diving nitrox, do 3 dives in a day.
Yes, you've now really got very much engaged with it. What was the turning point for you? What suddenly transformed you from being a nervous diver to somebody who was just, gimme, gimme, gimme? Well, no, I always liked it, but I would do my 1 or 2 Discover Scuba dives with a sort of an instructor sort of holding on to me. Because the wonderful thing about it is that it's the closest you'll get to being an astronaut, because most of us will get to being astronauts. Because you've got movement in all 3 dimensions. You're looking for someone or you're looking for something. It could be above you, below you, behind, in front. And once you've got a modicum of control within the water, you're pretty much doing everything on your breath. So you can ascend or descend on a single breath. It's quite, most of the time, and depending on the conditions you're diving in, because you have to keep your breathing very well regulated. You want to use a little air. You want to breathe slowly, steadily, regularly, etc. There's quite a lot of elements to yoga to it. And then, of course, there are things you can see, because, I don't know, do you dive, Jonathan?
No, I'm more of a glass-bottom boat man myself.
Right, okay. But, when the glass-bottom boat where you see the turtle or whatever, and then it moves on. If you're diving, you can get right up to the turtle and just watch the turtle or follow the turtle for as long as you like. And, on a safari, it's very, very rare on a safari to actually see animals having sex or hunting or those big wildlife TV moments. Whereas diving, it's actually quite easy to see all these natural processes taking place. And, yeah, it's extraordinary. It's like you're traveling into another world. There's an often quoted statistic. I think we've explored about 5% of the available ocean mass. If that, there's extraordinary stuff down there. There is creatures. We dived an undersea volcano in Halmahera, Indonesia, and there they have these vents where you've got hot gases and hot water coming up. And you've got these creatures, these little shrimps and things that have evolved specifically to live around those. So it's endless and fascinating.
You, like most people, like me, did the PADI courses. I think we should explain that there's an overseeing body called, I think, is it CMAS? I can't remember who is responsible for setting standards globally, but actually the biggest by far and away acknowledged sort of training system is PADI, the Professional Association of Dive Instructors, I think it stands for, and that's where most people encounter it. But for example, if you come from the UK, the BSAC, the British Sub Aqua Club, is an equivalent thing. But I think for you it was PADI, wasn't it?
It was PADI, yes. There's a number of diving bodies that issue, sort of loosely speaking, globally recognised certifications, and you've also got your local dive organisations. So you've got PADI, FSI, and CMAS are three of the big global ones, and also NAUI, which is an American one that also trains globally. And then BSAC used the CMAS system, which is originally French. Its first president was Jacques Cousteau.
The good thing about it is that for people who want to explore it in exactly the same way as you describe, there's this sort of start-off thing where you can have an experience of diving, but you're physically in contact with an instructor all the time. But that gets you sort of, as it were, under the water. And then, as you say, the first step is what's called the open water course, which is the sort of the basic course that establishes you as a diver down to 15 meters from memory, 12 meters.
18 for adults in PADI, yeah. No, that's fine. No, I mean, I think, well, the Discover Scuba course, you don't have an instructor with a hand on you at all times.
All right.
Discover dives. You will be in the water, but you're only allowed to, I believe, off the top of my head, it's 12 meters. And you're only allowed a very small number of divers per instructor. So it's not quite, but you are basically handheld. You're not really looking after your own buoyancy and your own position in the water.
Yep.
And yeah.
And it is a great way of discovering it. It's a great way for people to find, what this world is that people talk about scuba diving, and actually get to taste it for themselves. Slightly controversially for me, there has been. Yesterday, I was watching a hangout on air that was all about the ethics of captive marine animals and tourism, and there's been quite a storm recently about one of the big blogger conferences having a visit to a dolphinarium on its list of events that are taking place during the process of the conference, and there's been a massive storm amongst travel bloggers about all of this, and I must admit I was sitting there thinking my first experience of diving was in Qalhat, somewhere we were talking about just now, with dolphins, and I remember feeling very uncomfortable about the dolphin thing, except that they kind of sold it to me on the basis that they have nets around them, and the nets are only surface nets, so the dolphins, anytime they wanted to, could easily hop out. But the thing that really turned me on was that first experience. The first experience under the water, with all the gear. That I thought was fascinating. So much so that within a month, I was back doing the open water course.
Yeah. No, it is fascinating. But I mean, I think. Yes, captive dolphins are not good.
Not good.
I don't know if you've seen the film Blackfish about killer whales. I mean, the range of pelagic marine creatures is huge. Killer whales are covering hundreds of miles a day quite often. I'm not sure what the precise number is for dolphins. But, you can't, and these are intelligent creatures. I mean, I don't know if you've dived with sharks, Alistair, but, once you've met a shark,
I swam over a nurse shark that was in Belize once, about 9 foot, and my heart, I practically had a heart attack on the spot, but it wasn't interested in me, and that was fine. But the encounters that you were talking about just now, and Jonathan, this is why you really should try it if you get the chance, are very much there, because equally in the Caribbean I've found myself coming around a corner and coming face to face with a turtle and swimming with it for a while. I've swum with dolphins in the wild in New Zealand. There are some great experiences out there. I don't know if you ever got. Did you dive in the Red Sea? Because one of the Red Sea experiences is swimming with the whale sharks that come up there at a particular time of year.
I think you have to be quite lucky to get whale sharks in the Red Sea. I mean, when we were in Qalhat, we were doing a lot of diving and hanging out with the divers. The thing about whale sharks, there's Ningaloo in Western Australia where they send out spot trains. Okay. So that when they swim by, you've got a fairly good chance of actually being there when one's at a depth that you can dive to.
I remember it being described to me as a fairly seasonal occurrence in the Red Sea, but maybe not.
They are seasonal, but it doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be in a spot. They're rather like hammerheads. They will come by in season, but whether you're in a particular patch of water where they happen to be is a very different issue. So they have got it down to a fine art and ningaloo in that they send out spotter planes, and while you're not guaranteed a sighting, you can spend a week there. It's quite likely that your boat will get there and the spotter plane will still have a track on it, and it won't be down too deep because there are limits to how deep recreational divers can go safely.
We've talked about talked about some of the joys of diving and that first experience, and then taking that first course, which is the open water course, where you learn to do the things you were talking about, getting water out of your mask, sharing air. If you have a problem with your air and you need to get air from somebody else, how you do that, all of those sorts of things. But then there are stages above that, and the next one is, from memory, advanced diver, which enables you to dive. You get a qualification to be able to dive at night and to do wreck diving, and then after that you go to rescue diver, and rescue diver is the one that really brought you into the show this week, because you had been writing about it. And let me put that up on the screen. This is a post you made, why every parent who dives should do a rescue course or similar qualification, and I just wanted to talk about that, because I think you decided you wanted to do rescue diver for a very specific reason, because you had a nasty experience.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I just want to clarify about the wreck diving thing. That actually, you're not really supposed to go inside wrecks without a huge number of safety precautions and advanced training, because the challenges of very advanced training, because there's all sorts of challenges within them. The most obvious one being that if you've got a problem, you can't just head straight up to the surface. You have to get out again. So apropos rescue diving.
Wreck diving is sorry. I mean, just wind back. It may be that it's changed slightly. As I recall from advanced diving when I did it, it was part of the course. In other words, you had a very basic introduction to it, as you did with navigating at night. But it wasn't a qualification by itself, because alongside rescue diver, there's also of a similar level. There was there's wreck dive qualification in PADI, and there's a bunch of others as well, I think, aren't there?
Well, I think most sort of professional wreck divers and most people who are serious wreck divers actually go down the technical diving route,
right?
Where you're using gas mixes and you're also using double redundancy. So you have 2 tanks, you have 2 computers, you have 2 masks, and you're using gas mixes because you will be down longer. They're often very deep, and also if you're actually going inside these things, there's an awful lot of skills that you need. But PADI does do wreck diving courses. They're not, I think, terribly well regarded within the industry as a whole. And as you read on the piece, I mean, my first open water dive was actually inside the wreck at 31 meters, which you are not supposed to do. You really are not supposed to do that.
I can go one better, actually. When I did my advanced course, they decided to combine a night dive with a wreck dive. So I actually dived inside the hull of a sunken World War II destroyer at the bottom of Valletta Harbour at night.
That was overhead. It was closed above the head.
I know. It makes me.
I'm always amazed by. I kind of collect, like, whenever I talk to a diving instructor, I'm like, what's the most dangerous thing a student has ever done to you? And when I talk to divers, I'm like, what's the most dangerous thing you've ever done without knowing it's dangerous? But yeah, that's pretty spectacular. Dangerous.
Yeah.
No, I'm sure it's spectacular. Wreck dives are phenomenal. but
Yeah, but there are wreck dives and there are wreck dives, and there are the real wrecks, which are really dangerous, like this destroyer. But it should be said that a lot of resorts these days have deliberately sunk small ships and the like, and before they sink them, sorry, excuse me, before they sink them, they clear them of debris and obstructions and things, so they're kind of sanitized in a way, right the way up to I think the biggest is the wreck of the Oriskany, which was a World War II end of aircraft carrier that a few years ago they basically they stripped out everything and sank it in the Gulf off the Gulf Coast in the States, and it's now a sanitized dive there. And apparently it's in just the perfect amount of depth of water, and you can swim into the aircraft hold, and it's all very exciting. But it's not covered with dangling cables and all that kind of dangerous stuff. The advanced course, I remember, the other aspect of it I remember, and this really does sort of pertain to what you've been writing about. And by the way, I have put it up now on the screen, your post. There's a link to it now, and that's one of the things is that as you dive deeper, you become subject to all sorts of effects. Not least after 15 meters, you get you start having problems thinking. I forget what the phrase is, what the name is for that psychosis.
No, narcosis.
And
the magic of the deep.
Magic of the deep. And I remember very well when I was doing the advanced course, one of the things that we had to do was go down with the dive instructor to somewhere around 20 meters thereabouts and do this little exercise where you had to take out your dive knife and hand it to him and then take it back and put it back into your sheath. And I always remember coming up afterwards having done it, and I thought done it rather well, and he said that was great, but you actually you don't realize it, but that took you something like 25 seconds to do that instead of the 4 or 5 that you thought it took you, and that's the trick that the kind of the mind plays on you, and those are the kinds of dangers that you sort of learn about at advanced level. But I think that where you have now really excelled by going to rescue level is that you now know how to deal with them.
Well, in theory, what most diver training starts to do is to teach you what you don't know. So, what's the Rumsfeld quote? You'll know this, Jonathan. Known unknowns.
So, there are unknowns we know and unknowns we don't know.
There are unknowns we don't. Is that it? Yes. Okay. So sort of you begin to realise what stuff you do not know. So it does enable you to handle a variety of situations. So, for example, it teaches you how to bring an unconscious diver up from the bottom safely and to get them to shore while still providing rescue breaths. So you're sort of stripping off their equipment and swimming and giving them mouth-to-mouth resuscitation at the same time. Anyone who does rescue course, even tiny women. A friend of mine who's an instructor is 5'2" and I think 45 kilos. Tiny, and she had to get a guy out, full-grown, large guy, out of the water on her own. So they teach you that. They teach you various things about handling medical emergencies. You learn a lot more about the physiology of diving. Because there's all sorts of things that sort of happen to the body at depth, and there's all sorts of injuries that you can incur coming up in depth. And it does make you a much safer diver. You learn more about how the equipment you're using works. You learn how to handle events like the event which caused me to do my rescue course, which was when my son almost had a diving accident in the Blue Hole. And it does make you a much safer diver. But what people I know who've got sort of thousands upon thousands of dives, gosh, who's the guy? 10,000 hours to be expert in anything. Outliers. Malcolm Gladwell in Outliers theorizes that it's 10,000 hours to be expert in anything. So that's 10,000 dives. And really the only way you become a better and better diver is by diving often and by diving in lots of different conditions. That said, the rescue course is something that I would hugely recommend, but I don't want to try and oversell it as a sort of hyper advanced thing. It's challenging, it's physically challenging, there's quite a lot of knowledge content and so forth, but there are many levels that you can go to above that.
There was, as we say, there was a reason you did it. It was because on a dive in the blue hole, which is very deep and very disorienting, Zach didn't realize which way he was going, I think, at one point, and you suddenly had to grab him and make sure he was out of the water, and that's what triggered it in for you, the need to learn more.
It wasn't exactly that he didn't realize which way he was going. He just had an issue. He'd been fixing, something had gone wrong with his fin, and his buoyancy wasn't that good at that point, and he got about 30 odd dives or whatever. And diving, like skiing, can be quite difficult for children, because if you have a gap between your first, on the ski slopes, your centre of balance will change between one ski trip and another, because all of a sudden you're 4 inches taller. And at the same time, your buoyancy might change with diving. So he'd had an issue where he'd had a problem with his fin, so he'd gone to fix it, and he drifted up a little bit, and then he thought he'd fixed it, so he deflated to go down. Then he realized he'd got a problem with his fin again, curled into a ball, and didn't reinflate to stabilize his buoyancy. And because he'd never been at depths below 12 meters, although he was at that point allowed to 16, and he'd never been in the blue, and he hadn't been warned by the instructor, who was supposed to be his dive buddy, that when you just have blue, it's hard to tell what depth you're at, he started to sink, accelerating fast, and he didn't realize he was sinking. So there was a friend of mine diving below him, and I was diving at the level that he'd been at, because I'd seen all the way through that the instructor wasn't keeping an eye on him, and that he wasn't in control, and he hadn't been properly briefed. And he just started to drop. He went accelerating like a stone, which in the blue hole, where you've effectively got no bottom, the bottom's at sort of between 80 and several hundred meters, but depending on where you are, and we were on the outside, so it's in the hundreds of meters. It was potentially fatal. So, I went after him, and I got to him, and by the time I got to him, he just started to realise that something was wrong, and so I got us back to both neutral buoyancy, and we continued to dive. But like a lot of people who do the rescue course, it was realising that I didn't really know how to handle it, because my first response was, for a nanosecond, I was like, this can't be as bad as it looks. This simply cannot be as bad as it looks. And I looked down at my friend below us, who's also a mother, and whose daughter wasn't diving at the time, and our faces just met across 15 meters of water in just absolute horror of what was happening. From that I learned also that you cannot necessarily rely, this is an extremely good expert instructor with thousands of dives, he just wasn't used to children. You can't necessarily rely on a dive professional.
There's two. We're getting really to the end of our time, because I think we've been going for an hour already. But there's two questions I really have for you now, and that's firstly, how easy was it to do rescue diver? I mean, could I do it? Could
I would guess so. It depends on. I think you need to be reasonably physically fit, and it also depends. You'll get given the course at different levels. If you're trying to go onto the professional track, like you want to be a dive instructor, they will really put you through it. Yeah. So they have a drill where they simulate panic. Okay, if you're on the professional track, they will have guys thrashing, flailing, trying to take you under, ripping off all their gear onto the water, spitting the regulator out, and you have to calm them down. Okay, if you're on a non-professional track, and my instructor was being terribly gentle with me, because last time he did a course he broke someone's finger, because it can be quite full contact. You do normally have bruises after it. Everybody has bruises. If you don't have bruises, you're not doing it right.
Okay.
Hearing all that, Theodora, though I'm sure more adventurous people watching will be delighted by the excitement that's going to have. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave you because some.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
And really great to be talking with you.
Okay, good to have you with us, Jonathan, and I do hope your tour in November goes well. Is full and goes really well.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Hi.
Okay, let's wind up. The last question was really sort of a follow-on from that, and that is that the post you wrote about it, and the one I picked up on, is why every parent should. What I'm really wondering is, because you're in a slightly odd situation in the sense that you are, the pair of you do dive together from time to time. Quite often, parents don't dive with their kids. They'll send their kids off with another group of younger kids with their instructors, and you'll go off with yours or whatever it might be. So my question is it something that standalone is worth doing? Regardless of whether you're a parent or whether you like to use it or not. Do you feel better for it in that sense? Is it worth?
I think yes, it is. I think it's worth doing once you need to have a certain number of dives and a certain amount of experience in the water before you can really benefit from it. So I would say once you're it depends on how fast you progress as well, but once you're at the 60 dive to 150 dive mark, it might well make sense for you to do your rescue course. But then you get people who do hundreds and hundreds of dives and become extremely proficient divers without ever doing that training. But fundamentally, yes, I would recommend anyone do it. And it's hard, but it's certainly not as hard as some people will have you believe.
Excellent. Okay.
Thank you.
Let's leave it there. You heard it here first. Go to Oman and Jordan, and go diving.
Go diving. Yeah, it's fabulous.
Okay. Theodora, thank you very much for joining us, and for everybody else, back usual time next week. Haven't got anybody lined up yet, but if you want to be in the show, as it were, and you've got something you want to talk about, then let me know, and it'll be here, usual place, 5 o'clock on Wednesday. So for now, bye for now.
Bye.